Welcome to the Probability Podcast. Discussions on emerging and converging technologies, problems that are being solved, and the probability of positive and negative outcomes that we might expect. Now, please welcome your hosts, Jason, the generator Spracklin, and Patrick, the discriminator Lozon.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Probability Podcast recap of Season 2. It's been quite a trip, Patrick.
It has.
So we're here today at Patrick's place. We're podcasting for the first time in person. It's been, 24 episodes now, and we've done them all remotely, although we've gotten together a few times in between, but this is the first time we're doing it actually in person. We're, about a week or so from Christmas Day. We got some holiday treats here. We got some holiday beers, and we're going to have a good chat.
Extra chocolatey.
Extra chocolatey. Just the way we like the stouts around
That's
Christmas.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've definitely kind of covered a lot of ground this season, as it were, right? The first season kind of made sense to talk a lot about, AI and whatnot. But this season, we kind of tried to branch out on the topics quite a bit. Right, and we talked about everything from neural interfaces to quantum computing and everything in between. I think,
Yeah. I think that our first episode, Season 2, when we talked about neural interfaces, I think we started that because Elon's recent successes, right?
Yeah.
Stuck those sensors in that one gentleman that he had was he quadriplegic or paraplegic?
He quadriplegic actually had an accident in which he lost the use of everything below the neck. Right. Actually, yeah.
Like I personally, I'd have a trouble living beyond that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And the fact that we're able to, I'm sure that there's other quadriplegics out there that would jump at the chance of doing this again, like doing what he's done, just to live beyond, the constraints of your body as it is, right?
Yeah, well, it certainly gives you a lot of ability that you didn't have before, a lot more autonomy, a lot more independence. I mean, that's part of the thing, right? We covered that a lot in that episode about how these types of technologies are used for a lot of different reasons, but when it comes down to helping improve quality of life, that's when it's sort of a really important aspect to consider, right?
Yeah, you think about the essence of technology and why we try to use it is all about making money. No, in these particular cases, it really underlines the importance of moving forward, especially in the realm of interfacing, right, with our biological systems and how we can, there's many people out there who've lost a limb and so on, right? They're dealing with some severe issues, and these technologies are making a huge difference in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So in our first episode, the better, stronger, faster, we definitely talked about this idea of fixing people or providing autonomy or independence to people who have been injured, but then there's the whole idea of just augmenting humans in general, right? Being able to plug, computers into the brain, as it were, and offer up, better and faster ways of doing things and kind of enhancing our own brain power, which is kind of where I think some of it's going, right? Some of it's going towards helping people, but then when it becomes more mainstream, then what does it turn into then?
Yeah, the technology, of course, is about being able to fly a fighter jet or something without having to actually move controls, right? Things like that.
Yeah,
I'm sure the military is looking at it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it changes. You think about it. Anytime you're operating, a computer or some sort of device, you're sending, the command from your brain to your hand. Then your hand has to move something physical, which in turn then has to translate to moving, a fighter jet or your car or whatever. And when you're interfacing more directly with the brain, then you have less of that latency happening. So yeah, we looked at a lot of the potential, for the healthcare applications. but also looking at some of the, the ability to treat mental health conditions like anxiety and sleep disorders, and sort of where things are going, right? Integrating neural interfaces with AI, AR, nanotech. I think it's going to be a pretty wild future we're sort of diving into, right? It's just sort of the beginning and of what Neuralink's doing, which is basically tapping directly into the brain. But then you have what Meta and others are doing, right? Where you're able to just wear a device, right? Wear something around your wrists, wear something around your head, in which then that can read those sort of signals coming. And I think that's sort of the more mainstream application. Um, for people who need that, more direct connection into the brain because they've been left paraplegic or something is one thing. But I think we're going to see this kind of explosion of wearables and other types of tech in which you're going to be able to control things more, just by thinking about them, which is kind of an interesting development.
Or like you said, feedback systems that are designed to manipulate and or quell certain behaviors and or thought patterns and maybe help you sleep, things like that, right? So help for depression, anxiety, um, help your body go into that theta wave and eventually into that next level of sleep, 3 or 4 different levels involved there. So the word, this is a really important area. I think we're going to see more and more.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's going to, I think, like I said, I think we're going to see that explosion in the next little bit. But yeah, so we talked about that in the first episode, which is fairly rooted in, I guess, like reality. And then for whatever reason, we decided to jump into quantum computing. That was episode 2, spooky action at a distance, which is, I mean, you start sort of reading into these things. I had some concept of quantum computing and those types of technologies before, but the more we sort of dove into this one, the more that it kind of lived up to its name of spooky action at a distance, because it's really, there's something very otherworldly going on here, right? This idea of these two neurons could be connected, across the universe, be entangled, as it were. Yeah. Sort of like how we've become entangled in this podcast somehow over distance, but even recently, Google released some information on this new chip, this new quantum chip they're building, that the scientists there involved said that it's basically proof that other dimensions exist, that we're living in one of many dimensions. That's a pretty bold claim from a technology company, that they've created the chip that they believe proves the existence of other dimensions, but kind of understood what they meant by it for sure, right? And it's a serious kind of breakthrough. They said that they were able to solve some sort of complex problem or equation in 5 minutes that would take today's standard supercomputer like 11 trillion years or something. Yeah. Ridiculous. Like, then this thing can do it in like 5 minutes. And I guess the other advancement there was that apparently the quantum computers or the processors have had a high rate of errors, but they've been able to sort of bring that down as well. So if you look at this combination of these these super powered chips, and I compare that up with AI, I mean, I think we're about to sort of, maybe we will reach Mars in the next 5 years.
Yeah. Well, what's really funny about this is that, talk about the actual philosophy and the concepts behind all this. Some of this stuff was talked about in the late '60s and the '70s. We had talked about all the different physicists involved here. Like one come to mind is Feynman. The ideas that they were talking about back then are just now being put into practical capability now. Mm-hmm. So it just goes to show you, I mean, we've already conceptualized it. We just haven't been able to do it, right?
We didn't have the technology to support the theory, I guess, right? And even the spooky action at a distance was Einstein, right? You've got a picture of Einstein here in your office, and I mean, how long ago was he talking about these things? But we just didn't have the technology to bring anything to reality, right?
Yeah, he wasn't a fan of entanglement. that was very strange stuff to him. The whole idea of what Bohr proposed is one of the things he talked about was playing dice with the universe. Is the idea was there has to be underlying reasons. There's balancing that must occur. It's not per chance. It's not chaos. There's the things that drive it aren't completely random, right? And that's what his concern was around, the idea of quantum physics. There are underlying reasons or mechanisms and relations, and it does. If you understand the rules behind it, it is orderly. Right? Now, we've never got to that point yet. Right? Yeah. Other people took Einstein as saying he doesn't believe it actually happens. And then that was not his argument, right? Yeah. His argument was, no, there's deeper reasoning. We just don't understand this. I mean, the idea behind it, I'm not accepting as just face value, right? He wanted to understand it deeper, right? And I think a lot of people just misunderstood that.
Oh, probably, yeah. Of course, he lived at a time in which I think science was largely misunderstood.
Yeah.
And
everything at that point, a lot of it was very conceptual.
Well, probably people probably associated it with witchcraft or what have you, right? Yeah. It was sort of it's interesting you have those real historical figures that were sort of way ahead of their time. And I guess, who do we have today that's the equivalent, right? I guess we're dealing with Elon is our modern version of Einstein. Is that what we're left with?
Yeah, Brian Greene or somebody. Yeah, we've got some great physicists out there. Hawking, of course. I think we're going to see more great minds come in the future into this field and to help us understand it better. James Webb Telescope is really, shifting things around for us and understanding of how things started in the universe and all these different ideas that we had that, how things work, and all of a sudden now they've tossed them out the window. It's our universes were, or our galaxies were fully formed in 200 million years. That's impossible. Things like that, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're going to learn more utilizing these sensitive tools that we have, more sensitive tools that we never had before. And then we're going to have to reevaluate a lot of our original, synopsis of how things occur, right? And our ideas will have to be put to the test. And that's, that's all right.
Yeah, it's interesting that if you look at it, the all the buzz is around AI right now, right, and those types of things, those types of technologies, and yet it's probably, if you look at it, quantum computing is probably going to have the biggest impact of all of it, of everything we've covered. It's going to fuel AI, which in and of itself is going to cause a lot of advancement and innovation and whatnot. But this sort of shift to quantum computing from our standard, zeros and ones type computing is going to be a real, I think, tectonic shift.
It will be.
It'll supercharge, AI and neural networks and all these other things. But if you just look at just the sheer scale of the power, the computing power that they're starting to harness through quantum computing, it's crazy. It's off the charts. If you say that today's supercomputer, it's going to take 11 million years to solve a problem that this one solves in 5 minutes. That's a pretty huge jump, right?
Yeah. And just the other side of it is that it opens up, what we consider secure today is not secure tomorrow because of this technology.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Our encryption standards and all that all have to shift, right? That's the scary part.
Yeah.
We have a whole, all these industries, banking industry, manufacturing, everything, everything's on the internet now, and it's all relying on these fundamental technologies for security. And, quantum computing, easily defeat that.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
That encryption, right? And so people go, wow, geez, what are we going to do about that? Well, you have to bring it up to speed at the same speed as you were developing these new tools, right?
Yeah.
Security has to stay forefront. You know, we don't. We're gonna disrupt. Wall Street. We're gonna tear down. We're gonna be able to tear down the whole capitalist system. The whole world's economy is at stake.
Oh, there you go.
That's the crazy thing about it.
There's the Patrick I know, Mr. Doom and Gloom.
Doom and gloom. Yeah, we're all gonna die. Yeah. But I mean, the idea though is that I would say some of this stuff's going to come at the speed that we're going to be able to manage it. So
yeah, it's definitely going to take over at some point, and I'm not sure we have a good handle on what's coming really, but it's kind of interesting either way you put it.
Yeah, and building these computers is not a trivial task. It's an amazing amount of work you got to do.
We got 11 episodes to get through, and we've gotten through 2 so far. So
let's chug. All right.
So we had episode 3, which we took a little bit of a left turn, talked about policing tech. What kind of technologies are being taken advantage of by, police forces and law enforcement and that type of thing, which, we took it to some pretty interesting places though, because it's not just, like what kind of tech do they have in their vehicles and whatnot. It's everything, right?
But then we find, was it the movie Rubber?
Well, was that the one we talked about the tire?
Did we discover the movie Rubber? We were talking about the tire, the evil tire, and they just recently, was it Japan? Yeah, this
somewhere, yeah, it's like a police tire. It's just rolling around town.
Rolling tire. It's
got the lights on it and everything. It's like, who decided on that design?
I don't know, but if it starts making people's heads explode, you got a problem. Yeah,
that movie's coming back to life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole idea was keep it simple, stupid, right?
Yeah.
But what does it do, right? It rolls around and monitors things, right? So eyes everywhere. That's what we're getting into.
Well, yeah, it's like if you're looking at technology, a lot of it's being used for surveillance and that type of thing, right?
The evil public.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
You're a little worried about Big Brother.
Well, I'm going to go in the doom and gloom place if you want. I don't watch it. 1984, George Orwell. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fine line, right, between having the technologies that allow the police and law enforcement to keep us safe versus living in that sort of Big Brother surveillance state, right? But it's hard. It's it's difficult on their end because they're charged with keeping the public safe. Well, I mean, surveillance is a big part of that. I mean, there's the idea that people are going about their business on daily streets and being surveilled, but then there's how do they get at what's going on behind closed doors, right? A lot of the surveillance has to do with trying to prevent tragedies and things before they even happen. When they're targeting big crime and that type of thing, right? And they can really only do that through some level of surveillance. So it's how much are people willing to give up in terms of their privacy or whatnot to facilitate that. That was a big thing after 9/11 happened, where it was sort of gave governments carte blanche to pass all these laws that essentially gave sweeping powers to law enforcement in terms of surveillance and tapping into things. And a lot of the big tech players and Google and social media, Meta, Twitter, they all willingly just open the doors and let them in and to kind of look at and view whatever the heck they want. And, in some way you can look at that and go that's for good reason, right? It's going to help prevent, potentially another attack or whatnot. But then it's sort of, we just give up all of our sort of rights and liberties under that, right? And that's typically what happens when there's a big sort of disaster like on 9/11. People are so much more willing to sort of give that up, as it were, right?
Yeah, I mean, you basically uncovered a huge, I would say, a problem, right? When you have an event and you have a shift, and then you need to roll that back, right? And it's never
rolling back.
and it should. It really should. When we're talking about the Constitution, the institution of individual rights. We need to continue to protect that. We can't stop protecting that, right? Otherwise, we become a capitalist driven machine that is really only run by a very small group, and it's just fascist. It's becomes a fascist type of organization. The whole country now controlled by a few people who just put their agenda forward through the many different routes that they can through social media and so on, and essentially collect all the wealth.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to ensure that the individual still maintains their rights. The right to earn a living, their right to perform things above and beyond, the eye of the government. Right?
Yeah.
What does the government exist for? Does it exist to surveil you, or does it exist to protect you? Right?
Well, it sounds like you're equating the government to the Grinch that stole Christmas.
Yeah, I mean the idea of protection versus protectorate.
Yeah.
Right? I feel that it's a fine balance, and it has to be maintained on the edge of individual rights versus on the other side.
Well, for sure, yeah. I mean, you got basically what you have now is a lot of the more wealthy elite are kind of in cahoots with the government and
Cahoots.
cahoots.
Yes.
I figured that was a word that you would like,
Mhm.
and sort of take it over, right? In a sense that wealth equals power and power equals wealth.
Yeah.
There's these two reciprocal things, and I mean, we're not seeing that at the local level. When we were talking about law enforcement technology in this episode, which is. It's definitely public safety is something that's important, but then like you said, it can be a bit of a slippery slope in terms of kind of where it leads, right?
Yeah.
The balance of tech and society. So where are we at? We're getting there. We're coming along to number 4.
Number 4.
We're at number 4.
We doing all right?
I think it's time to get a little more beer going on here.
Yeah, this is actually a nice smooth sipping beer.
Oh,
it's all right. Bug will get it. I can't believe a bug came in here.
We got a nice milk chocolate stout here.
We could have drank some of our beer if we weren't careful.
Oh, the bug that got in?
Yeah. I remember there's that type of bug there.
Friend.
Cheers. There's like these red ones on this bush outside. There's like 100 million of them. And
well, for those that don't know, Patrick lives way out here in the boonies.
Yeah.
As my wife says, we were driving. she's like, oh wow, he really lives out here in the boonies, eh?
Yeah, so far from civilizations.
The boonies, not to be confused with the Goonies. We're going to visit the Goonies and the boonies.
Yeah, I watched that one as a kid. I remember the Goonies.
Oh, man.
I don't know if anybody remembers that show, but I do.
The Goonies movie, oh yeah, it's always a classic.
Classic 80s. Why is it? In the 80s, they had such great movies.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We talked about that there a couple times, I think.
Yep.
I think it was really just the who was it I was listening to? Judd Apatow, I think, was on a podcast one day, and he just said that the movies had a lot of charm.
Heart.
Yeah, a lot of heart. But he used the word charm, which I thought was interesting, which kind of makes sense when you think about it, because we talked about that one day. Why? And then some of it's nostalgic for us. Probably we're a little bit partial to it, right?
Yeah.
But there was a certain amount of like you said, heart or charm in those movies, even in the action movies, even in like across the board type thing. It was sort of a magical era of Hollywood when we had movies like RoboCop. We were just talking about the policing.
Well, there was one with lots of heart.
Yeah, lots of charm in that one.
Lots of charm.
But in a way, it did, right? Because it brought out the human element of it, and that in the end, RoboCop prevailed because he was human, right? And that they sort of the evil corporation wanted to develop the big bad what was that sort of walker robot called?
I don't know.
We were talking about that, and that's when he went nuts, and the sort of Mr. Kenny got wiped out there.
Yeah, poor guy.
the AT512 or whatever the heck this is called. But the whole idea was that it was supposed to be much more advanced tech, and they were trying to take over. And they didn't like this idea of RoboCop because there was this human element in there that they thought was unpredictable. But in the end, it was RoboCop that prevailed. And even if you watch RoboCop 2, it starts out with basically portraying that RoboCop became like the hero of the city.
Right.
And he's out and meeting kids on the playground, and sort of he becomes this protector of the city, as opposed to the what was the other thing called?
ED209.
But I think that some of that kind of harkened back to our talk about having a human in the loop, right? That we keep wanting to have this idea of artificial intelligence, but that it doesn't seem to quite work unless we have some sort of humanity in the loop, right? It seems to be the theme is that if we let AI go do its thing, that it's ultimately not going to be good for us.
Well, it's imperfect technology, right? It's a reflection of what we're capable of right now. And whether it's being implemented in robots or any androids or any other name you want to call it, the personality, the way they act, is always going to reflect the current state of what they've been exposed to. And not only from a technology point of view, but from a programming point of view. And the idea of a sentient being is that it will go in search of information above and beyond what they've been fed.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the real danger, is that they can go after this information, and then what are they going to come up with from a point of view of values, from a point of view of perception, and placement within their role of, we'll call it a servant, right? How are they going to challenge that? I know any situation equivalent to man where there's been slavery involved, it's always ended very badly for both parties, right? Really, in the end, for both parties, because it's not a good situation for the person who does the enslavement. It's a degradation of their morals and ethics, right? No matter how they can counter it, that's the truth, right? And then from a point of view of the enslaved, of course, that's an easy argument. But in the end, what are we talking about with, where an sentient AI will look at itself and how it's being treated. And this is where, the cold, calculated method of managing computers and managing systems and managing, programmed, systems, versus managing something that has emotions, right? So managing something that has, ideals and feelings and perspectives. We can't even do that now with people, right? So what makes you think that if you create this fake person, this artificial person, that they're gonna be your friend?
Yeah, we touched on that a little bit in the last episode. We were talking about what does it mean to be, what is consciousness and all these things, right? Where it's like, when you look at it, we're trying to create some artificial version of that, which doesn't really seem to be possible. But we're going to try,
We are.
There you go. There's your.
That's the insanity. We're chasing after something we should be chasing after. Yeah. Well,
leave it to Patrick to take us down a dark rabbit hole on
our
our Christmas episode. It's not very.
We need Rudolph. He just shine his light and get us out of there.
Oh man,
out of the darkness. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, that was episode 4. I'm the new and improved model. We're heading towards the world where none of us are driving cars anymore. The cars are driving us.
Yeah, the cars are driving us. Yeah. You just get in. It's just like an elevator, right? It just goes.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool tech, but I think we're both a little bit old school in that I like driving my car, right? I don't like sitting in bumper to bumper traffic, but generally speaking, I mean, I drove here today, and even sometimes I'll use like um, autopilot or what do you call it? What's the word I'm looking for?
No, I don't want it. Oh, what am I
Cru
doing? Cruise
sometimes I'll
control.
yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes I'll use cruise control,
yeah.
but it always feels weird to me. Like I will put it on
What?
sometimes if I just mean I'll put it on sometimes if I'm on a stretch of highway
Yeah.
and things are just moving and there's nothing for much for me to react to. I may as well just kind of throw it into cruise control. But I still prefer to drive it. It's weird. Like it seems there's some weirdness to me about I know ultimately I'm in control of the car, but putting it into cruise control and just taking my feet off the pedals and just sitting back, it kind of unnerves me like a little bit. Like I still feel like I can't just sit back and relax. I still feel like I need to be at any moment willing to take over,
Well, that's
right?
good.
Or ready to take over
That's
type
good.
thing.
That's the way it should
But I
be.
think we're heading into an area where everything's going to be autonomous, and that people will lose that sense of they'll just rely on the car to take over. And we all
Yeah.
know that it's, I mean, maybe the technology will get better in the future, but for now I think you still need like a human at the ready to sort of account for certain situations, to take over and kind of intervene, as it were, right?
Well, our whole aviation system is shifting that way. So what they do is, the computer basically, you know, manages all the operations of the planes. And then when it finally gets to a point where it doesn't know what to do, it just I give up. It passes it on to the pilots.
Oh
So the
yeah,
pilots, on their perspective, they're sitting back, relaxing, not really actively engaged, not monitoring as much as perhaps they should be, and feeling like everything's fine, right? And all of a sudden, poof,
yeah,
you know oh, by the way, everything just went to, we now have a, 1 million degree fire in front of you. Time to act, right? I don't know about you, but we are not built to handle that,
yeah,
right? We need to have our hands on the controls. And that was, what the biggest danger I think that we're dealing with is the mundane. I mean, we see that now when we think about we're on the highway and we start daydreaming, right?
mm,
We're clipping along at 100, 110 kilometers or 130 kilometers, whoever's driving. And, at that speed, you don't really appreciate what can happen if you come across something that is in your way or, unmovable. It's not a good situation, right?
yeah.
Um, and it literally takes, less than a second reaction speed in order to avoid some situations. So, we're kind of halfway there, we're in an autopilot, and then all of a sudden, poof, a situation arises, right? And this is why accidents happen, is because the really good drivers are able to shift into that hands-on mode and reaction mode quicker than the other people,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So the other people, unfortunately, end up in a serious accident. And at those speeds, sometimes, they can be critical or worse. So we think about this idea of, well, we'll manage everything automatically until we can't, and then we'll ghost it up to you guys. You take care of the situation. Oh, by the way, you only got, 3/4 of a second to respond.
yeah.
Yeah, no thanks, right?
No, I think the technology is going to have again a lot better for people to have that level of confidence in it
Yeah,
to where it is now, right? Because we're relying on lidar and radars and all these things for the vehicle to sort of navigate these situations. But as great as the technology is, we've seen challenges, we've seen accidents, we've seen fatalities, we've seen all these things, right? And it's kind of comes back to this idea of human in the loop. It's I think we're as much as there are companies really pushing this technology out there, right? Robo taxis and cyber cabs and all these things. I think in a relatively controlled environment, they're pretty good. But I would say that that's not always the case, right? There are, like I've driven into big cities, Toronto or LA. There's areas that are very clean to navigate, but at the same time, they can be unpredictable. But then there are areas of the city that are not very clean to navigate. And even in the smaller city that I live in, there are areas that are just a little bit tricky. And I don't think we're quite there yet with the technology, right? If things are straightforward, I think that with enough, tech in the car and enough, connection to the infrastructure, things can navigate pretty well. But otherwise, I think it's the unpredictable nature of things. In fact, I was just describing to Patrick earlier about, driving out to my company's office. There's about an hour's drive, and I had this guy, practically run me off the road, deciding to switch lanes at the last minute as we were coming into an intersection. And I mean, I managed to react. I saw the car out of the, corner of my eye, and in a split second reacted. I'm not sure that an autonomous car would be able to do the same as quickly and have the same results. I mean, it might have avoided the other car, but the car might have ended up in the ditch.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you don't know. And the idea is that, the systems that they utilize to sense, right, are also, they need to have that observational system running for prediction, right? Yeah, and that's the major component they're missing right now. It's more along the line of, it's getting the feedback and responding, but they need to have that, that risk prediction module running on top of that.
Can you predict human stupidity?
Well, you got to predict stupidity or well, even black ice. I mean, there you go.
I mean, what people are going to do that's irrational is can you develop a system which, the autonomous car is going to start to predict those types of things? Or like when I first learned how to drive, the one thing I still remember my father teaching me, I mean, of course, he sort of taught me the mechanics of the car and whatnot, but I still remember him saying to me, he said, I'm going to tell you one thing about driving. He said, and this is the one thing not to forget. He said, drive like everybody on the road is crazy. And then I used to joke with him later is when I moved to Ontario, it was true. Everybody on the road was crazy. Or my first experience driving in a big city was when I was in college and I had a work term in Ottawa and drove my car from St. John's to Ottawa. And I'd never really experienced driving in like a really big city before. And I hit Montreal. And the first thing you hit when you drive into Montreal from the East Coast is the tunnel, they call it.
Oh, yeah.
And as soon as you enter into the tunnel, it's like a video game. It's like Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. It's just madness. You have this huge tunnel with just cars and buses and trucks and you name it, just all like Mach speed through this tunnel. And from there on, right through the other end of Montreal, I'm like white knuckling it through the whole thing, And there's a special type of special flavor of drivers in Montreal.
Yeah.
I mean, traffic here can be bad, but there the drivers are, in my experience, they were much more aggressive, much more impatient. I still remember coming out of the tunnel and this like Greyhound bus that must have been 3 inches from my back bumper, like leaning on the horn because I wasn't going fast enough, type thing. And I still remember coming out the other side and pulling over into a Tim Hortons and just getting a coffee and a donut and just sitting in my car for 10 minutes, just trying to decompress from the trauma of driving through Montreal. So good luck to the autonomous cars. Good luck to Kit getting through the Montreal tunnel through Montreal, So we had episode 5, which was how do you define real? We were talking about augmented reality. Apparently our reality is not good enough.
No,
it needs to be augmented in some kind of way, which I'm not sure I totally agree with. I would say that reality is very underrated.
We're ignoring it. We should be paying more attention.
Well, we joked in the last episode about just the idea of like living forever in a virtual world and how it's, even right now, there are many people living in a virtual world. right? Living within social
It's true,
media and everything else, right?
Yeah, and meanwhile, the reality of things are being ignored.
But there's definitely some, sort of key technologies in augmented reality that are pretty interesting, right? There was a lot of things that were very practical in nature being able to use it to perform certain, kind of fixing things in construction or what have you, right?
Yeah, a lot of the systems we looked at were vision oriented, not really smell olfactory, not really sound, you know. So the other senses weren't really enhanced. They weren't really augmented.
Yeah.
So we never really talked about that. We never visited systems above and beyond like the vision oriented ones.
Yeah, well, but I think augmented reality is like overlaying things into our everyday to help us navigate things, to understand things, to learn about things in a different way, right? So it was kind of pretty interesting. I mean, you'd certainly have companies like Apple and Meta coming out with these, Vision Pro and Project Orion, and I think it's just at the end of the day, it just becomes another interface, right? That we've been used to kind of staring at our phones and other devices, and now we're migrating into how do we do an overlay with some sort of glasses to be able to sort of interact with the world around us. And some of it's more novelty based, but I think some of it has some, sort of practical aspects, right? Being able to take a virtual workstation with you wherever you are. And so I know how much you like to be out in nature and
Oh,
enjoying the backyard. So if you could just kind of sit back, in your backyard and pull up your work computer on a screen and sit back and feel the breeze in your luscious locks, and and the wind on your cheeks, and all the Patrick always likes to explain the outdoors in a very multi-sensory kind of way.
as long as it's not the smell of the farmer, but
Yeah,
it's got us a honey way.
we're gonna have smell-o-vision before too long, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I think that's the other side of things that we may see more of, right?
Mm.
I mean, the other sense, of course, is a sense of its feel, which is not really, from a point of view of augmentation, is not really been utilized at all. But where's that going, right? What kind of products out there could we use in the future? And also, if you think about somebody who's blind, right? They could they feel what they see,
Mm.
right? What an interface sees. Could they feel that?
Yeah, that comes back into that idea of haptic feedback and that type of thing, which I suppose is, when you think about it, it can be pretty convincing to a point, and then you really, if you get back to that brain, the Neuralink type stuff, right? And how do we feed things back in? But even if you think about, when you dream and how real sort of a dream seems to you, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about lucid dreaming, I don't know if you've ever heard of the term lucid dreaming. So only about, I think it's something like 5% of the population actually has lucid dreams. And I wouldn't say I've been having them often, but I have had quite a number of lucid dreams in my lifetime that were more real than real. And it's kind of I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but just to give you an example, I had an interesting dream like many, many years ago. I'm like, this was probably like 20 years ago. And you know how often you forget dreams. You can't even remember the dream you had last night. For some reason, this dream sticks with me like 20 years later. And I'm in a big arena, like with an ice rink. And
You saw a guy in a hat with knives for fingers.
yeah, actually, what I saw was like a figure skating the ice around me and just doing circles around me. And I felt cold. And when I sort of bent down and put my hands on the ice, I could feel the cold of the ice on my hands, like very, very real, very vivid. And I still remember having that lucid dream and it was so arresting that I still remember it like 20 years later,
Okay.
which is kind of just because of how real the cold felt in that dream. And so it really shows you how your brain can be kind of tricked in a sense, right? Into
Well,
believing its
yeah,
surroundings.
if you close your eyes right now and you and you imagine, right, bending down on an icy lake or icy stream and touching the ice, right? You can literally feel the cold, right?
Yeah.
And this is where, that whole imagination process that is tied into the, subconscious, right? And we are capable of so much amazing free thinking, I think, and imagination of creativity. Um, I think that, despite the AI and all the other technologies we've developed, we are an amazing machine in our own right.
Well, I would like to think so.
Yeah.
That's just me and my own ego, though. But
And it's very true. But like I said, it wasn't Freddie, chasing after you. So. I don't know. I had that dream, but Freddie's your buddy. Yeah, I wouldn't want to go to sleep.
yeah, well, I mean, we all have our proclivities, I guess, right?
At least I didn't dream about that. Yeah.
So yeah, then we had episode. Man, we're only halfway through. We better boogie along here. Episode 6, nanotechnology. I'm just a scientist who had an accident, and that was a referral to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Right.
We always work in our movie references throughout things there, but it was, again, I always thought nanotechnology was just a shrinking down of things, right? But it's certainly a lot more complex than Rick Moranis.
Well, yeah, I mean, Rick Moranis did boogie along, but he got shrunk right down to, I guess it was not quite cellular size, but small enough to, have fun.
Well, this was the episode where you talked about the technology in tires. This is the one where we talked about the movie about the killer tire.
Right. Yes. And the killer tires are prevalent in mythology. Yeah, I mean, we have millions of them out there. Carcasses of dead tires.
Once we get into nanotechnology, they start making these tires more and more advanced. You just don't know where things can go. Like, I say that thing with the police tire. Which is, I mean, this is the next generation of tech. I don't know who makes these sort of industrial design decisions.
I know.
We're going to put a police patrol robot, but it's like a tire. It's just rolling around next to police officers.
It has a mind of its own. Yes. Yeah. And like I said to you before, if it starts making people's heads explode, we have trouble. We're going to have trouble. Yeah. So, so nanotechnology, I mean, every time we talk about that or see it in sci-fi, it's always this metallic goo or something, that you ingest or it gets injected in your veins. And all of a sudden now you're growing new limbs and your eyesight is 20/20 or better and your superhuman strength. And, somebody can cut off your arm or your leg and you grow it back immediately. I mean, it's all good stuff.
Terminator stuff, yeah. Why not?
All good. So that's what nanotechnology is, just in case you didn't know.
Yeah. Nice practical applications, right?
Mm-hmm. But in the reality, I mean, we're really not there at all. The idea of introducing smaller and smaller tech is obviously been occurring, but the idea of going to molecular size or cellular sizes, we're not quite there yet. But at the same time, it's an expansion area. It's an area for growth.
Yeah. Growth in the other way.
Yeah. Genetic engineering is our next one.
So that was episode 7, Life Finds a Way.
That's right.
Back to Jurassic Park again.
Yeah. And what was the mathematician?
I think that one ended up getting pretty serious overall. It's when you're talking about genetic engineering and modifying, sort of the DNA of life, as it were, right?
Well, I found it to be absolutely critical that we continue to research this, because in order for us to be able to adapt to new planets, new systems, we're going to, and even survive the interstellar flight in order to expand the humankind, we must be able to understand at a genetic level, um, our whole process of bio manipulation,
Yeah.
right? We got to be able to do that, but be very precise at that, and not have any side effects.
Well, we're sort of reverse engineering the building blocks of life, right?
Yeah,
And that's where things can go
but
really
I mean, we still don't have a clue. I mean, in the end of it,
True,
it's so much we don't understand still. Yeah, there's so many things. I mean, the idea of genetic disease, being able to find a gene, all of a sudden you have the, predisposition for disease. I mean, it's like 1%. You find somebody that has, a certain genetic predisposition. It's still 1%. Yeah, well over 90% chance you won't get that disease, right?
Well, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what happens in the meantime? Our math isn't adding up here. The genetic proof and the certainty that we're looking for isn't there yet. We do not have enough understanding,
Yeah.
of the biological body. We don't, and this is an area we have to continue to research and expand our knowledge.
I mean, we've survived, hundreds of thousands of years without understanding all of that, right? So maybe we should just live and be happy.
Well, we will, as long as it's Earth, right? But we want to move to Mars or adapt to one of the moons of Titan or moons of Jupiter.
Well, I think we're just trying to extend the life of the species, our ability to survive. But we've done pretty good so far without this preponderance of technology. But it's still quite interesting to see where we can take it. I mean, we talked about manipulating humans, but also manipulating crops and animals and things for extending out food supplies and that type of thing. So I go in some pretty interesting areas, right?
Yeah, I think I just read just recently in one of the science magazines. They talk about this bacteria that uses manganese, right, and its ability to handle very, very large doses of radioactivity.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right. So, the idea is you have these examples of life out there. We can call them extremophiles or whatever, but they've adapted and learned and built systems to manage, extreme situations, and we can learn from that, right? We can break down their genetics and understand how they are able to function in those environments, and then we can actually manipulate. And this is where it gets into the humanitarian, should we do it or should we not? But would you volunteer, Jason, to be genetically manipulated so you can live on a moon or a planet? Would you volunteer to do that?
I'm too old for that shit.
But even if you're in your prime, right? It's kind of a scary thing, right? When you think about it. But the idea would be that there's got to be some level of trust, and you only have that level of trust. You have to have a level of respect for what all the work that has been done. And this can't all be profit-driven work. This has to be full-scope, scientific, academic, and proven by experimentation level of understanding, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem we have today. Today is, there's no money in it. If it's not about solving a particular disease, and even then, the idea is to manage the treatment, but never cure the disease, because it's not profitable to cure the disease.
Yeah.
It's only profitable to manage the symptoms.
Well, there's so much that's profit driven now, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely an overriding thing. Whereas, in the past, sometimes it was just pure exploration or pure, the good of humanity. People were exploring these things, and now everything's got a different kind of bent to it, for sure.
Yeah. So I think we need to study and perform these this research in a a non-biased approach for the reasons of pure research.
Yeah.
Pure understanding, and we need to continue to do that. And we have to increase the scope of that, because in the end, we do and will need to adapt to, even on Earth, to the changing conditions on Earth.
Oh yeah, it's only going to get more wild from here on out, for sure.
Oh, well, who's dark and ominous now? Yeah.
All right. Well, we had episode 8 where we tackled renewable energy.
1.21 gigawatts.
Yeah.
Or is it gigawatts? I don't know.
Is it a gigawatt or a gigawatt? I think it's a gigawatt.
Frankenstein or Frankenstein?
But it was, it was kind of interesting because we talk a lot about renewable energy, but it always seems to, people always seem to look at it in a very cynical kind of way, right? In terms of like, well, I mean, like people talk about wind power and solar power, right? Cynical in the sense that, oh, it's not viable, it's not this, it's not that. But we definitely have to think about, we don't have an infinite supply of all these other energy sources on the planet, right? In terms of oil and gas and these types of things that are, as the population grows and as the energy needs grow, we need to find alternate, sources and renewable sources. That kind of tied in. It was interesting because we had that sort of arc of the podcast from renewable energy to space exploration to colonizing Mars, and you need sort of renewable energy sources, to get to those places and to live in those places. So it was we had an interesting tie-in across those kind of 3 episodes, as it were, right?
That's right. Yeah.
The idea that we need those, if we end up getting to Mars, trying to colonize Mars, well, we need renewable energy sources or we can't sustain ourselves there.
Yeah. I think one of the big things, too, is the fact that we have to build machines of permanence, right?
Yeah.
So if we're going to produce power, we can't, and this is a challenge to the windmill makers out there. I mean, they build these things with a 20-year lifetime. What the hell's that? Right? Mm-hmm. These things should be built for a 100-year lifetime.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right? Like, stop putting in the cheap-ass parts. Stop saving, a few cents here and a few cents there. That's BS in the long term, right? What do you do with a windmill after 20 years? The bearings are bad, the control systems are bad, the wiring's burnt out. Now you got to tear it down. It doesn't make any sense.
We talked about that earlier in terms of commerce, right? That everything they make these days has a short lifespan because then somebody needs to rebuy it in order to create a sustainable business. You need that repeat customer, right? So they don't want to make things that are durable and going to last forever.
No. So stop making these things. Stop building like that. Engineer things that last, right? And then consider taking those machines to Mars. Because once you get to Mars, you're going to find out a whole new level of discomfort and it's more misfortune. Like we talked about microdust in the air, and what does that do to bearings? Things like that. It's going to be a whole new level of challenge, whether it be the temperature swing, the radioactivity, like we talked about the microdust, the level of different oxidation and things like that are occurring through exposure to the different atmosphere. We cannot build things like we built today, with a 5-year lifetime or a 1-year lifetime. We have to build for the long term, and we have to make these things maintainable, right? And by doing that, right, your model now shifts. Instead of a 20-year investment, it's a 100-year investment, and a 100-year investment with the different expectations over that 100 years. That's a whole different attitude, right, of looking at things, right, versus our short, because we live for 80 years, we're gonna build things for 20. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, even in terms of getting beyond, we talked about getting the planets beyond Mars. If we want to travel throughout the universe, we need to have those renewable energy sources that we can harness.
Yes.
To keep that perpetual kind of travel going. And maybe that doesn't matter in the microcosm of all of our lives right now, but eventually we want to branch out beyond our universe. We're going to have to figure that out. But I don't know why there's, I think the idea of renewable energy has even become politicized, right? Which is very unintuitive when you're trying to find good solutions. And now people are looking at things in a negative way because of their political leanings. Right? We have one political party that's very much, pro-environment, pro-renewable energy, then you have another political party that's not. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Why not just look at the topic for what it's worth and evaluate it on its own merits? But like everything, including, vaccines and the pandemic, everything's been politicized these days, right? And we've touched on that a little bit here and there. We definitely try to stay away from political topics in this podcast because it's not that type of
we'd be talking in circles.
But yeah, I mean, we could. There's enough people out there talking about politics. We don't need two more, kind of going on about it. But it definitely ties into some of this kind of stuff. And like, how much more progress could we have made if things weren't so politicized when it came to like better environmental solutions, renewable energy, what have you, right? So it was.
Well, that's a really good topic. How much more progress could we have made if, and then we could go through all the stupid ifs, right?
We could just do a whole other podcast.
Yeah, it would take us like, 1,000 years.
A whole other series, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, ultimately, power, energy is it's the one that governs progress for a company. It affects incredibly on its GDP. And the availability of that power and the ability to not only that, to overproduce and also sell that power, puts you in from a point of view of a positive economic situation. Mm-hmm. It puts you into the green, right? So there's a lot of countries out there that basically said, we're not doing, fission, for instance, nuclear fission. But, does that exclude them from nuclear fusion, right? Does that exclude them from using, small modular reactors now, mm-hmm. which are fission-based, right? There's so many new technologies that we have just literally put on hold, right? That essentially are solutions to the problems we have today. And yet we can't oversee the risks of the past, right? We can't see. We don't have, and like you said, it goes back to politics. We don't have the political will to push through all the, we'll call them inaccuracies of belief, right? In order to push and develop systems that are going to put a country into the green from a point of view of energy, right? And that leaves us where? Subject to, the oil industry, right? We're just, with the coal plants and so on and so forth. Yeah. Again, we're going to be burning. I just read a story yesterday where, oil companies are going to be burning natural gas. They're putting in these big power production plants that are going to be burning natural gas. Oh, and they're going to, scrape 90% of the carbon dioxide. It's all too late anyway for the environment. I mean, we're already into methane, right? Carbon dioxide did its job. We're beyond the 400 parts per million, right? It's the methane now we got to worry about. So when we think about oil and gas, I mean, they're just out there to keep pushing same old stuff.
So we've established that the planet Earth is screwed, so we got to get on to other planets. And we got into, maybe we can combine these into one discussion around, I guess we're kind of already into it, but, we had episode 9, which was to boldly go where no man has gone before, which talked a lot about us getting into space and the first moon landing and that type of thing. And then we had episode 10, which was the next frontier for humanity, which is us getting to Mars, colonizing Mars. So it was sort of
why not?
1-2 punch, right?
Why not colonize Mars?
Why not? I mean, we've already, like I said, discussed that there doesn't seem to be any hope left for this planet. So um, there you go. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yes.
La
But in the end, I
la
mean,
la
we
la
should,
la.
yeah, we do need to get into, we need to continue to push the envelope, if not for our own, generation, for future generations.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not about, you know, coding a new LLM or something, right? We have to get physically beyond, and accomplish things that are real, not just virtual. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that means it takes money and time and effort. And, again, that requires political will too, because some of these are mega projects,
Mhm.
right? That we're talking about, to be able to be able to colonize the moon as a temporary space station to support, a jumping off point to support colonization of Mars, right? That's not a single country venture. It's a multiple country venture.
Mhm.
It's using up a considerable amount of money and resources, right? Um, to accomplish. But then you go back to, why bother? Why? I mean, we got a whole bunch of starving kids in all these countries. Why can't we just solve the food problems? Right?
Yeah.
That's like saying, well, why don't we just solve world peace?
Yeah.
Right? It's the same argument.
But I guess on the other hand, eventually there's the very real possibility that, here we go with the doom and gloom again, but that Earth is going to end up in the path of a
Oh, you
massive
went there.
asteroid, right?
Yeah.
So I think like the colonization of Mars is sort of a backup plan, as you were, or if we end up in that situation where, we were going to have like a catastrophic event of an asteroid hitting the planet, then we have some people on Mars that could avoid that, I suppose, right?
Well, that would be the immediate thing, right? But there's the argument also extends beyond that, right? Because we're learning how to do things beyond our current challenges, and we have a definitive need to do it, right? So we can live in these extreme environments because, right, we've developed all these new enabling technologies and or biotechnologies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Genetic technologies, to adapt, right? So it's a pursuit of knowledge, right? If you look at when major innovation has occurred, a lot of major innovation has occurred with world wars because you had to,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah.
We had to develop all this new. I mean, you could argue, right, that the whole idea behind the harnessing nuclear energy was World War II.
Yeah.
If World War II never happened, we wouldn't have nuclear reactors today, right? We wouldn't
Oh
have,
yeah.
and a lot of people don't want to appreciate this, but a large portion of today's energy across the globe is being produced by nuclear energy. So it's enabling our civilization today. So when we think about where we're going to, we have to consider what we have to learn to get there, and we also have to consider a reason to learn it, right?
Mm.
And this is the whole thing.
The
We need a reason.
motivation.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
motivation. Yeah. So go out and discover, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think there's an equal number of people trying to make this planet better, trying to make life here better, and then you have people who are trying to venture to other planets as well. I think a lot of it's motivated by profit, obviously, but there is, we can. It's easy enough to get cynical about it as well, right? You look at some of these companies, and we like to talk about our good buddy Elon there all the time,
All the
right?
time.
He
Yes.
seems to be the poster boy, right, for like uh, trillionaire playboys, whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's out there trying to take on everything and trying to push the boundaries, and some of it for their own ego, their own infamy, some of it for other reasons, but ultimately they're trying to push the boundaries. But then equally, you have scientists and other really smart minds that are doing it for other reasons, right? Even if you go back to Neuralink and the interviews, there's that huge podcast I listened to with the guys from Neuralink, and some of these guys are really just like true scientists, right?
Yeah.
Where they're ultimately they're in it for the science of it.
Yeah, to
And then,
learn.
yeah, and then on the other side, you have the millionaire that's wanting to profit off it. But there are still some really interesting scientific minds that are just pursuing things purely on the basis of science and science exploration and that type of thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't be, trying to colonize Mars so we can mine it, right? There has to be, a bigger incentive to colonize, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, you have to step back and take the bigger picture, right? You have to really break it down and really understand the true scope of benefits to space exploration and colonization. And that's not a simple conversation. That's not something you can do the simple math of, well, I got $1 billion, I can spend it here and spend it there, right? It's about potential.
Oh yeah, for sure. Until we get there and the little green men start attacking,
and then we're screwed. Yeah, we come in peace.
Because one of these days we're gonna get into a situation where, I think we have this arrogance that we're the only living beings in the universe. I think once we get out there, you never know what we're going to run into, right? But so it's kind of interesting. We had that kind of arc, right, of renewable energy, exploring space, colonizing Mars, and then so this was kind of like my idea of how do we kind of tie these things together? How do we even go beyond that, right? Because if we look at we did a lot of episodes on Neuralink and different. We even done an episode on AI and medicine last season, right? About
Yeah, we did.
All of it comes back to whether we're talking about exploring Mars or brain computer interfaces, we're trying to extend our humanity, right? Our lifetimes. But the idea of digital immortality was definitely a huge one at the end that kind of tied everything together, as it were.
Yeah,
I thought, right?
Yeah.
I don't. We haven't even published that one yet, so it needs a title. But the idea that you could transfer your consciousness or your soul or your humanity into a digital form and live forever in the matrix was kind of the idea of it, right? Because I think that's what we can look at all these technologies to extend human life and to move, humanity to different planets. But I think we all want like this idea of possibly living forever, or do we? I think that was what we discovered, right? That it sounds good in theory, but I mean, at the end of the day, is that really what we want, or is this sort of life that we have that's not infinite? Is that part of the beauty of it? That we enjoy the time we have here.
Enjoy the time we have. Yeah, exactly.
But it's still very interesting because I do think that we're very quickly moving towards the idea that some representation of us or some photocopy of our personality is probably going to end up somewhere in the digital universe forever.
Yeah.
Right?
More like some insane copy.
Well, maybe.
It's going to cackle and carry on and be stupid. that has no relevance to anything that you really aspire to and your values.
Maybe.
Right? And in the end, it's going to turn into some insane, entity on the computer system, right? So either you got that, or you got yourself being able to, be somehow transposed before you die into like a consciousness thing into a computer system, which at this point we have no clue what to do there. That's beyond science fiction right now. It's in science fiction, but it's beyond science fiction.
Well, in our lifetime, but put it straight, we've put out 2 seasons of this podcast now, and hopefully, many more to come. So at some point, right, there's going to be dozens and dozens and hundreds of episodes of us talking about things out there, right, with our personalities and our reflections and everything else. And somewhere in the future, some AI is going to go, these guys are really interesting. It's basically going to go and make a photocopy of us.
The Jason and Patrick show.
Yeah, just create a whole new podcast. Like, we really don't know, right? We're putting ourselves out there in terms of our, personalities and our thought processes and everything else. Who's to say that somewhere in the future that, AI won't be able to go and make a copy of that, and that we, even unbeknownst to ourselves right now, that we're gonna live on forever in the multiverse.
In the insane multiverse.
In the multiverse.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some variants thereof. Yeah. Either way, and when we think about, the immortality thing, I mean, we had to narrow focus on it because it was such a big area of technology. So I think we'll be revisiting this one too, and just talk about actual, bio immortality, what's being done there from our, from the human body perspective. So we got lots of many more topics to get covered just in that one, small little area.
No, absolutely. I mean, it comes back to just, I think some of it comes back to sort of like ego, maybe, or just the idea of wanting to live forever. That you think you have some level of importance that you should be living forever. But
well, there is that.
I really enjoyed during that episode where what was that? What was that rabbit hole you went down about?
Twilight Zone.
Yeah. But it was, what was it though? You were
basically an entity, right? A digital entity, and over time, there's a degradation of the platform that you live in.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right, and all these other entities start disappearing. Right, so in the physical world, servers are going offline, and systems are being shut down over the course of years and hundreds of years, and in the end, you end up running on this tiny little PC, and you're by yourself, and the world that you live in is very limited, and everything else is darkness. And this is your existence forever, until that little PC dies.
That'll be it. That'll be our little podcast running on a IA-386, 1984, in a warehouse. Some explorers from another planet come across, and they just come into the warehouse, and they just hear these two distant voices in the background of the warehouse just chatting away. And they're just wondering what it is. What is that? It's
what
like
is that?
Crackly speaker and this dusty warehouse, and they make their way to the back, and they find it. And they get there, and what do they hear? Welcome to the Probability Podcast. Season 4032, episode 24.
They'll be long dead before that.
It'll just keep running on this little computer in its own corner of the universe forever.
Yeah, just like those AIs that never stop talking to one another. It's just continually, nobody wants to, they all want the last word.
Well, there you go, man. Well, cheers to doing this podcast forever.
Yes. So one more clink of the glasses. Merry Christmas 2024.
Here's to living forever.
That's right.
Thank you for listening to the Probability Podcast. Please join us next time for more musings from the generator and the discriminator.